Well, hey, today I want to say something a little controversial. We love some controversy, but it's 100% true. A lot of worship bass players don't know what good bass tone sounds like.
Really?
And I know that might sting. I know it sounds harsh. And maybe you're looking at me like, this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. But hear me out. See, a lot of bass players approach tone like they're demoing a bass. You dial in something that sounds aggressive, fat, bright, pick a flavor that you like. But if any of the bass tones that I will share today were used to sell a bass, I mean, quite honestly, those basses probably would not sell because the tones are not impressive by themselves. Bass tone is in the mid-range. That's what cuts through the mix. That's what people hear. But a lot of times, the first thing bass players do when they're setting tone is they blast the bass or the lows and cut the mids. So in this video, I'm going to solo the bass on a few massive songs. The point of the video is to help you think differently and change your approach and thought process for your bass tone, and maybe even change how you approach it in this upcoming Sunday. So let's get into it. The first song I want to look at is Build My Life, and it was a massive hit. It's still being played all the time in churches. Let's listen to it and I'll share a few observations.
Multitracks.com.
It's a little noisy. It is a live recording after all, but it's very compressed. There's such saturation. It's kind of, there's a little bit of drive in there. In isolation, it's honestly a little too compressed for me, but in the mix and with the drums, it sounds perfect. And look, before you say, oh, what a terrible example, I'm going to have a good variety of songs for you, but this is a great example of a song that a lot of churches still play. And it's also one of my daughter's favorite songs, so we're gonna roll with it. So this next example is actually a secular song, super popular on the radio all the time. I still hear it in the grocery store and other places all the time. Check this out.
That distortion on the bass gives the song so much more power.
It's so gritty. This tone would work really well for a lot of up-tempo songs. In isolation on that video, it almost sounds like it has too much mid-range to my ear. One other thing about that one in particular, it doesn't sound like it's fresh strings because it doesn't have that like crispiness. It's possible that the tone is rolled off and there's some EQ, but to me it just sounds like the strings aren't new, but the mid-range is right and is blended with the drums, and it sounds massive in the mix. Let's take a look at another worship example, and this example is a little weird, but it also illustrates the point that the tone is not what you expect, and it's surprising at the choice of tone that was made for this particular song. Let's take a listen.
Multitracks.com.
I bet you did not expect that bass tone, and for the matter, that bass part. But really, I don't want to focus on the part. I want to focus on the tone. The tone is very interesting. And before you come at me in the comments about like, oh, there's a huge difference between a produced song and maybe a live tone, I do want to kind of address that. And we'll listen to the next song. That one is actually live. But again, it's a tone that I would not expect, but it's great in the mix.
Multitracks.com.
And so that was New Thing Coming by Elevation Worship. And you could tell it's live. There's fret buzz. It's not perfect, but it's perfect for the song. And I actually did a full song breakdown, went really deep into all the parts. It's got one of the coolest, I think, bass lines that I've heard in worship in a very, very long time. So I did a full breakdown of that. Check those out in the description and I'll link them up here. But they are live, and that tone, I think, again, is not what you would expect and not what you would say is quote unquote amazing tone in isolation, but in the mix, it's perfect. I don't want you to think, and I know some of you are probably thinking this, like, oh, you conveniently left out some really amazing bass tones. The thing is, all of the impressive bass tones that you're thinking of, the people shaping those tones are making very intentional, specific, strategic decisions in the context of the bigger picture, in the context of how they want the overall song and sound of the band to be. And bass isn't important, but it's only a part of it. Bethel comes to mind, right? They have 2 electric guitars for the most part, and they don't really have a traditional rhythm guitar where somebody's just playing power chords. And so the bass in the Bethel environment in the mix can actually take up a lot more room and space and energy than if it was in another context where there's a rhythm guitar playing power chords. So their bass tone is shaped to fit their environment. And that's the point of this video. It's not for you to go, oh, you need to copy and you need to have your bass tone sound like this. The point is that you need to think about your bass tone in your context and shape it in a way that fills the right frequencies and matches the environment that you're in, and not just setting your bass in isolation in your bedroom. So some common threads. Saturation is the first thing that comes to mind. There's harmonic content, not just clean, shiny, perfect tone. There's dirt. All that saturation, that grit helps the tone fit and cut through in the mix. Also, all of those parts are compressed. A lot of them are very compressed. You could say smashed. And the mid-range is dialed in perfectly in all of them. And it's so important not to just automatically reach for the scoop and take that mid-range out for many reasons. But now let's check out that clip from David Funk where he talks about the mid-range.
Tone is in the mid-range. To me, like, having good low end as a bass player should be a given. So the way we define our tone is in the mid-range. And people hear low end in the mid-range. That's the interesting thing, because we don't really hear anything like in those sub-harmonic zones. That's what we feel. So at church, that's what's coming out of the subs. But when people are listening to something on their phone, they're not hearing, their phone isn't reproducing 80 hertz, you know? So what we're hearing are the harmonics of those root notes. So we want to lean into that. We want to give a harmonically rich signal.
So he says we want to give a harmonically rich signal. And all of those examples have a harmonically rich signal. And I think that all begs the question, what is good bass tone? And look, I am not going to answer that in this video. This is not what that video is about. This video is more for helping you change your perspective and thinking process to shaping your tone that doesn't just look at your bass in isolation, but factors in some of the other things that we talked about. So I want to hear from you. Were you surprised by those examples? Did they meet your or exceed your expectations, or did they fall short of what you expected to hear in a song that's so popular and so massive? Will you be making any changes to your tone or your thought process? There's some links in the description where you can support the channel. I super appreciate all the people that do. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in another video.